New week, new countdown, and let's get started with today's Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Each week we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. If you're new to the show, Countdown to Classic goes through your expert input on everything relating to the sure-to-be amazing World of Warcraft Classic. Today, we touch on a little bit of everything raiding with interviewee AK, the guild leader of well-known private server guild Grizzly. This interview is some general blanket coverage of all raids and raiding concepts in vanilla World of Warcraft. And if you're screaming out for more in-depth questions on specific raids, fear not, as I'll be getting to a focused individual episode on every raid and hopefully dungeon eventually on the show. If you've run a certain dungeon or raid a million times and know it like the back of your hand, and you'd like to put your name down as an expert on that certain raid or dungeon, or even if you're an expert on any area within vanilla, then please do write into me now and potentially reserve an eventual interview on Countdown to Classic. After today's interview, we'll have another 2 calls in today's Calling Countdown segment. The first being all about how to hate the Alliance and influence people, and the second touching once again on attitudes towards changes in Classic. Now, if you're a fan of the show and you'd like the chance to voice your opinion about vanilla World of Warcraft to the world via a quick call on the show, then please do reach out to me via the show's amazing Discord or on Twitter at Count2Classic with the number 2, or email me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. You'll find all those links in the show notes for each episode. Last thing, before we get stuck into it, I just want to remind you all that as of this week, the show will be reverting back to a 2-episode per week format, mainly being Mondays and Thursdays, in order to allow listeners to catch up a little bit easier and to ensure that I get some personal time back so that I can actually play World of Warcraft and have a little bit of a social life again, since I've pretty much no-lifed it the last 4 months in order to get the show established. Now that I'm pretty confident that that goal has been somewhat achieved, I can pump the brakes slightly and just balance things out a bit so that I can still bring you what you've come to expect from Countdown, whilst also not running myself into an early grave. But with all that said, let's get into it with this fun interview with AK, all about raiding in vanilla World of Warcraft in today's in-depth interview. Okay, we've got a caller on the line, and I want to throw out a big Countdown to Classic welcome to AK. AK, how's it going?
Hey man, it's going great. Thanks for having me.
No, pleasure to have you on, and I'm so happy that you agreed to this interview. You're definitely someone I've been dying to talk to. You came highly recommended from recent interviewee North, and obviously I've heard your name around the trap, so I'm very, very excited to have you here. Now, how we do things basically to launch into these interviews on Countdown to Classic, if people aren't aware of who you are, we'll get a little bit of an idea about you as we go through your World of Warcraft resume. So you ready for this one?
I'm ready to go.
Okay. Now, with as much specificity as you're comfortable with, where in the world are you from?
I'm from the U.S. and New Jersey.
Excellent. Jersey. All right. Now, how long have you played World of Warcraft?
Since the very beginning. Maybe like within the first month or 2 after it released.
All right. And what was your original main character's name?
My first character.
Oh, they say
I got to 60.
They say you never forget your first. They say you never forget your first. You're forgetting it.
Well, I had like a level 9, but it doesn't really count.
No, I see what you're saying.
My first character was a dwarf rogue, but my second character, which is what I leveled to 60, was a gnome mage named Shpa, SHPA, on Stormhaven Realm, on the US servers, of course.
Sorry, on which server was that?
The US servers on Stormhaven.
Excellent. And so any other classes that you've hit a level cap with, either in the vanilla days or since then?
Many. A lot. In vanilla, I got to 60 on the No Mage, and then some guys on that server went to another fresh server called Maelstrom, where I leveled an Undead Warrior to 60. Now, it wasn't all that quick because I kind of like took breaks in between. I was kind of busy. I was young. I was 13, 14 years old. So it took a while, but I hit 60 and did some raids and shit. So it was fun.
Excellent. Now, do you prefer to play on PvP or PvE servers?
Oh, PvP by far. It makes the game. World PvP is really, really fun. I mean, it's not really fun where, you know, if you're a low B and you're getting ganked over and over by, you know, high levels you just don't have a chance on. But in terms of like end game World PvP, there's nothing more exciting really besides, you know, maybe select raids. But World PvP, like 40 versus 40, raid versus raid, is just insanely fun.
Okay, now this might be the funniest question that you get during the whole interview, but can you tell the listeners what is your highest level of raid experience, both perhaps in the vanilla days and since then?
Are you talking about like in terms of like hardcore or like server first or world first?
What have you done in terms of, have you cleared all of Nax or what have you?
So I guess I'll answer it like this. So in vanilla, my guild got stuck on Twin Eps in AQ and killed, I think, a few bosses in Nax. I haven't really rated hardcore in retail. I didn't really start going really hardcore until I started playing private servers. So on private servers is when I started really getting competitive and hardcore. I've always been a competitive person, but never really had time to, you know, do the retail grind of, you know, leveling 4 or 5 characters and, you know, raiding 5 days a week, 6 days a week. Just kind of too busy of a person for that. So private servers were a nice alternative for me where I could, you know, put in a lot of time on my own time and raid hardcore there. So basically private servers raiding hardcore was definitely where I started. I've cleared on private servers. I've played mostly vanilla, a little bit of TBC, very minimum Wrath of the Lich King. In vanilla, I've just recently cleared Nax for the first time on Lightbreaker on Light's Hope. I've been playing vanilla since 2011. I've done Molten Core a million times, BWL a million times, AQ a few times, and Nax just once. TBC, I've done, I believe, everything up until Sunwell. I haven't done TBC private server in Sunwell. On retail, I did a little bit of Sunwell. I did Caligos and Brutalis, and that was it. But yeah, that's pretty much like the gist of my, you know, upper echelon experience in WoW.
Okay. Now, are you currently playing World of Warcraft? And if so, where?
So right after we cleared Nax, we killed Kel'Thuzad. I told my guys, you know, going to Nax, like, look, we're going to clear Nax once and, you know, we're going to take a break and, you know, see what we're going to do from there. And we cleared Nax, killed KT. I took like a month and a half break. And then, I decided that I kind of want to just like take it casually until Classic or if something else comes out. Obviously Northdale, the new server just came out. I am playing there casually. I'm currently level 46, Orc Warrior. And, it's pretty fun to play casually. Currently a social in the top guild on the server, Progress, PvE wise. And, a lot of friends in there. I have a lot of other friends that are Horde. So it's pretty fun, but that's basically what I'm up to.
I love the definition of casual there because I've bumped into this a few times already in regards to where you're at with Northdale. And my definition of casual, because I say I play casually, I'm level 14. And you're like, oh, it's just a casual run. I'm only 46. It's all good.
Yeah, hardcore for me would have been hitting 60 a week ago.
Okay.
So it's a step down in my world. You know, raiding and, you know, doing all that stuff, hardcore. This is casual for me. I'm not, you know, leading a guild or leading any raids. I'm just kind of taking it at my own pace. So,
No, all good. Now, do you have a quick plug for any places online where people can find you and your work? Are you on YouTube or Twitch or anything like that at all?
I do have a YouTube channel. If you YouTube Grizzly Kel'Thuzad, you'll be able to see a video I just released recently of my guild killing KT and some other fun stuff in the video. I also have a video on there from a couple years ago on Nost where my guild kited a mob from Duskwood called the Twilight Corruptor to Stormwind, where it kind of just like one-shot people. So it was pretty fun. But yeah, those are my two videos on YouTube. I might upload some more stuff. I'm not sure if I'm going to, but I do have a Twitch channel. It's twitch.tv/AK_Grizzly. I don't really stream too much. During my break, I was streaming some League of Legends, some other games, but I don't really stream too much. I don't upload too many YouTube videos. It's just like too much of a hassle for me as a guild leader just to manage that and, lead a guild. So I haven't really been doing too much of that.
All right. Now complete this sentence so we know where your allegiances lie. For the...
It's hard to answer. I'm not, I don't have an allegiance per se. But I think that if I had to come up with an answer, I think Horde is more fun. So I have to say for the Horde.
All right. There you go. Now, if listeners aren't aware, how basically, I really came across you is obviously about 3 months ago now, it feels like, I interviewed Alex Sensual on the show and popped that video up on YouTube, and obviously the comments came in, and I'll just read you a comment that obviously spawned you and I getting in contact with each other. And a user named Jesse commented that Alex says he's currently in Grizzly, which is true, but he says it's the veteran private server guild, which is false. The Grizzly that he's in is a knockoff of the actual Grizzly that is known to dominate vanilla private servers. And you took exception to that comment. Now, can you tell people a little bit about Grizzly and why that comment is not correct?
So I could see why somebody would think that. So I'll try to keep this as short and sweet as possible. So I joined the guild Grizzly back in, I want to say 2014, like a year before Nost came out. I joined the guild, played on Phoenix Emerald Dream with them. Shortly after I started to get whispers from a couple of the officers in the GM asking me if I was interested in being the raid leader and an officer, like maybe a couple weeks of being in there. I was a little taken back by that because the reason why I joined was to kind of get away from that kind of thing and just kind of, being there casually. Anyway, we ended up quitting the server and then going on Nost and played on Nost, played some other servers in between there, retail, a little bit of retail. And then later on, basically myself and the GM and a few others had a fairly large disagreement on things. Basically, the GM at the time was kind of caught in a lie about a lot of things. So I started my own thing, and pretty much everyone in the guild followed me. So, except for like a couple of people. And when we decided to play on Elysium, a lot of people were just like, yeah, just name it Grizzly, because we're basically all Grizzly players. And, minus the GM and, another officer. So that's basically why someone would say that. But we're way better than the guild was before. I played in the guild. I mean, people look at it from the outside, might see differently, but I played in the guild. You could ask anybody that was in the guild. In both guilds, and they would definitely answer that just the same as I did.
Okay, and Grizzly is obviously a guild that I've come to be slightly aware of over my sort of trials and tribulations over the last few months with doing the show, and obviously whilst, I don't promote private a server play per se. I far from ignore it, and I've got no problems talking about what goes on in private servers. And when we talk about the news of private servers, obviously you hear about some of the more well-known guilds, and names like Nope and Grizzly do come up. So my question to you would be, have you found that there's been a certain sense of notoriety about being not only a member but also a guild leader of Grizzly, or have you found that people sort of don't really know or hear much about what you guys do?
Yeah, I get a lot of people that whisper me, be like, "Are you the AK from Grizzly?" I'm like, "Yeah." Who's this? Like, "Oh, no, I just played with you on this server and that server. Glad to see you here," kind of thing. And then you get, the whispers where it's like, "Are you the AK from Grizzly?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." They're like, "Fuck you," kind of thing. People just have this perspective about top guilds that they're cheating or they do something that pisses them off, and there's always bad PR that comes with being. I guess you could say no. PR is always good PR, but I mean bad PR. Cost me my guild on Elysium. I had to take the guild off there because we couldn't recruit people because of bad PR. So yeah, there's definitely a notoriety of being the guild master of probably the most infamous private server guild ever.
Okay, now, with the achievements that you've hit in the game and also with Grizzly, you mentioned at the top of the show, obviously, that you're into, your goal these days seems to somewhat revolve around, at the very least, progression rating, and further on from that, hardcore rating. So the theme of this interview is really going to be on hardcore rating, your thoughts on the concept of going hard in vanilla, and also we're going to touch on a number of the raids and just get your thoughts and your experiences with them in the game. So we'll start with this one. As we do here on the show, I start with kind of the layup questions, and they're very broad and general, and we'll get into the specifics as the interview goes on. So, AK, I'll start with this one, and it's a quote that I'll read you from the WoW official forums, the classic forums, from a user named Eagles Gift, who says the following. Raiding will of course exist in Classic. How could they not? But as an early advocate for a legacy server and someone who's closely watched how this has played out over the years, raiding was rarely mentioned by the legacy server advocates. Most of the voices for legacy, now Classic, were asking for a return to the old world and old world gameplay. Professions, world PvP, class quests, exploration, non-trivial leveling, blah blah blah. Raiding was not a driver for legacy at all. Now, most of the requests for non-vanilla changes seem to be coming from the raid crowd, progression, class balancing, class buffing for hybrids, etc. My response is an emphatic no. Raiding drove most of the changes to World of Warcraft in the past. Raiders are welcome in the Classic environment, but I don't want to see Classic compromised in any way to accommodate raiders who want to take another run at raid instances but with a modified game. Just no. So my question to you, flowing from that relatively long post, is this. As a hardcore raider, do you feel that you want certain elements of the game tailored to you, or do you think that's a common misconception that the raiders are all me, me, me?
I feel I can see why people would think that. I don't think it would be, from an objective point of view, I don't think it would be fair for Blizzard to tailor the game towards hardcore raiders. At the same time, I feel like there should be some sort of compromise. You don't really want to make the game so easy to where you start losing people because it's not a challenge, the hardcore raiders. I feel like a good example of this is sort of the latest expansion of WoW, where they kind of just made it so that people that played an insane amount of hours in game were rewarded with the most by I played at the beginning of this expansion, and I was kind of turned off by it just because of the legendary drop RNG, some other random things. But basically, they need to come up with some sort of compromise to where they don't ruin the game. Another example I can think of is the game Wildstar. I didn't play that per se, but I know a lot of people that played it hardcore. Basically, you could only pretty much play the end game if you were a hardcore player, which was like 16 to 18 hours a day. kind of thing. So I think they need to come up with something. I feel like the game right now, like on private servers, is pretty fair for the most part. But if they want to change something, they need to come up with some sort of compromise to where it doesn't, ruin everything for a hardcore raider, but at the same time doesn't, get the other voices, the majority, pissed off, whatever it is.
Okay. And flowing on from that, obviously, I'm sure you've seen the recent water cooler post about what might be coming with Classic in terms of the patch 1.12 as a foundation and the update that we got from the developers there. Did you catch that one?
I did catch that they're going to use 1.12.1 as a base. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, I did catch that.
Okay, so what's generally spiked in conversation now as a result of that post is a lot of people seem to think now that it may be somewhat of a foregone conclusion that raids I was going to say dungeons, but I think more raids are going to be retuned for potential 1.12 talents coming in from the outset and 1.12 itemization and things like that. What do you have to say in relation to the possibility of retuning classic dungeons and raids?
I think personally, as a hardcore raider, someone who's been playing this game for a long time, I think that's a great idea. I think vanilla raids are fairly easy. There's very few bosses that I would say that I've done that if they didn't change, that it could still be pretty hard to do. Bosses like Cthulhu or Four Horsemen or Kel'Thuzad. But if they did, I am definitely for upping the difficulty on bosses. That is not a very popular stance on the issue. That's more of like a hardcore raider stance or someone who's been raiding a while stance. But that's definitely something that I would look for. It wouldn't be any sort of deal breaker for me, but that is something I'm interested in. I did play on a server a while ago called Scriptcraft where he did overtune the bosses and it made it more fun and interesting. So if Blizzard were to do that, I feel like that would be awesome, but it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me in any way.
Now, not sort of coming after you in any way, but what I would ask as a result of your answer there is, do you feel that, whilst I appreciate, yes, you are a hardcore raider, of course you want a bit more of a challenge, do you think it's a little bit of, and you alluded to this earlier, a little bit of a self-serving request when you know that obviously perhaps you might be part of a loud minority of hardcore raiders who want to be pushed further, whereas the majority of gamers haven't even knocked on the door of, say, I don't know, AQ40 yet?
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you there completely. I feel like the people who haven't played in vanilla or haven't played on vanilla private servers before, those people that are going to be playing are going to quickly realize that the end game content, the raids, are too easy if, they weren't to tune anything. Now, I wouldn't, that wouldn't, no skin off my back, because I've been doing this a long time. I know what, going into Molten Core or BWL, what I'm expecting from like a normally tuned server. So it wouldn't be, any skin off my back. I'm used to it. Obviously, I'd like to see changes, but I could see why, I would be the loud minority. But yeah, that's definitely my stance on that.
Okay, I'll read you one more quote. Sorry, we've got a few of them to come, but we'll go back to another quote from Reddit and the WoW Classic subreddit. And this is from user Eats Pandas, who says this. And they titled it, "The Case for Tuning Bosses from a Purist." And they say, 5 out of 6 people I know said that they are excited to play Classic, but they really want a challenge. Add-ons, knowledge, world buffs, and min-maxing will make vanilla values much easier. I'm for the vanilla experience being given to us again. That means difficulty. Tune it hard, tune it impossible. The server will be around for years. No need to rush content and progression. Also, no catch-up gear or nerfs, please. If you don't make it hard, there are entire parts of the game that get overlooked. And then, they go on to say a few things, a few examples, but I'll leave those out. Now, what they're saying is they go back to, if you don't make it hard, parts of vanilla are lost. I know you think that leaving it as is vanilla, but it does more damage to the experiences. So, my question from that post would be this. Do you agree that in order to retain the vanilla experience, we do have to make that change to tuning?
Yes. Now, my long answer to that would be yes. And the reason why is, if I'm not sure if you played back in vanilla, but anyone who played back in vanilla more than likely played on a server where they didn't have a guild on that server kill KT. Now, I believe there was only like 20 or 30, I believe, guilds that killed KT pre-TBC, which is insane if you think about it. There's, probably thousands and thousands and thousands upon thousands of guilds that, raided. Now, before releasing another expansion, you would think that a lot of those guilds would want to clear the entire, all the raids that were there. But it was, difficult at the time because there wasn't a lot of knowledge, a lot of game knowledge that, that players on private servers have today, or even on retail have today.
Well, I did play back in the vanilla days, but a lot of listeners know I've never raided before, so this is all news to me in terms of what goes on in a raid. I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube, obviously, but never actually done it myself. But just piggybacking off of what you said there with Nax, that's always been an interesting thing to me in terms of the number of guilds that actually downed KT. And I know the figure has been a little bit fluid. There was a Reddit thread started a couple of months ago where someone tried to actually list the number of guilds that they could confirm did down KT back in the day, and I think they started it out with about, here are the 39 guilds that did it, and then it blew out to about 120 or so that people started nominating, no, we did it. So look, let's say hypothetically it's anywhere between 20 to 120. It's still not a lot of players. So
still very minimal.
Absolutely. Now, in knowing that, when you go, do you think percentage-wise, and let's say at the worst end, it's 120 guilds that actually downed KT, and you talk about the percentage of, where there were 8 million players at the height of the vanilla days, and only 120 guilds downed KT, which is, we really are talking the top, the 1%ers, if you will, or not even, actually, perhaps much less.
Yeah, very, very small.
Very 0.5%, 0.3%. But how do you feel about if they upped the difficulty? That would bump that figure down even lower, and Blizzard now has content that almost no one is seeing.
So going back to, my point that I mentioned previously, there's just so much game knowledge and knowledge out there nowadays where if you are like a semi-competent guild, you should be able to kill Kel'Thuzad. I mean, there were some, no offense, I'm not going to call any, certain guilds out on, the guild or the server I played recently, Lightbringer, but there were some guilds that really just were very, very poor in terms of performance, and, they ended up killing Kel'Thuzad. So I'm pretty sure that at the current, tune that, Kel'Thuzad or, any of the bosses, 4 horsemen even, which arguably could be more difficult, if Blizzard were to take, exactly how they were tuned on Lightbringer, which, it was pretty well scripted. There wasn't anything crazy. I'm pretty sure a lot of guilds would be able to kill it pretty quickly. But if you were to tune it up a little bit, then, or a lot, you might get stuck on other bosses, or not even just Kel'Thuzad, even in AQ40, like Cthulhu or, Huhuran or something like that. It could make things interesting and make it so that, it's not a face roll for a lot of people based on game knowledge and add-ons and all that kind of thing.
And just to tie off this point on retuning, personally, how much more difficult would you like to see the raids? Let's say percentage-wise. Are you talking, 10%, 20%, 50%? Or do you want to tune so high that you are throwing multiple monitors out the window in frustration?
I'd like to see it where the majority of your raid needs to be in, how do I say it? Like, say, for example, you go into Molten Core, the majority, if not all of your raid should need to be in pre-best in slot in order to down, Ragnaros or, certain other bosses in there. And then going into BWL, you need to have, like, a lot of Molten Core loot in order to be able to down Broodlord or Chromagus, some of the more difficult bosses in there, and so forth and so on. I feel like that would be a fair way to go about it. Right now, based on, the fair scripts that Lights Hope or Elysium or whoever has, what other vanilla servers there are, they're all, pretty similar. You could theoretically go into AQ40 and down, every boss in AQ40 with pre-best and slot gear. There's no real crazy checks until Nax, in terms of gear. So I feel like it would be so much better, for Blizzard or, I guess as the loud minority to see raids tuned up to fit that kind of narrative.
Okay, so you wanted to get it to the point where if someone rocks up to Molten Core with, say, one green item, then you'd be like, what the fuck do you think you're wearing? That was so 2006.
I wouldn't go that far. A majority best in slot, free best in slot would be fair. It's actually asking a lot of people it takes a lot of time to farm 40 people their full best in slot. So I think majority, one or two or three items off wouldn't be crazy. Would it do it? But if you're, bringing people in greens, I don't think that should be enough to kill, Ragnaros or, other hard bosses.
All right. Now, you mentioned an interesting thing just before in about 2 answers ago where you talked about you'd seen yourself a couple of guilds with poor performance going through raids. Now, what are some examples, common mistakes that you feel guilds that can't get over the hump make that makes you roll your eyes when you see them going through a raid?
There's a number of things. I guess you could go for an example. I've seen there were guilds on Lightbringer who spent weeks on, one-shotting everything in AQ40 or two-shotting and then getting to Cthulhu and just wiping because there was always the same group of 5 or 10 players who just didn't know, what to do when Cthulhu would cast his laser beam on them, and it would chain to the entire raid, and the entire raid would wipe. And it's just things like that are what I would say would be poor performance. Simple raid mechanics. Granted, there are people in my guild, and including myself, who have made mistakes. It's not that we're perfect, but when you do it over and over and over and over again, there's obviously an issue, and obviously you're either you don't really care to get any better, or you're just not, up to par with, how you should be playing the game.
Now, I know you mentioned earlier, but just to confirm, you're very much so the guild leader of Grizzly, is that correct?
Correct.
Excellent. Okay, well, here's a great question for you. Now, in terms of raiding these days, in the modern sort of environment that with all the knowledge we have about vanilla World of Warcraft, what do you look for now when selecting your team of 40 for a raid? Now, I know it can change from raid to raid. You might want different classes for different places. But just generally speaking, are there specs that you will absolutely say, no fucking way, I don't care where we're going?
Yeah, definitely. There are definitely specs like, for example, like Red Paladin or like Boomkin. That kind of thing, where it's just like there's really no. I mean, the mathematics are done. There's just no point in having you in the raid. I can put another class in your stead, and that would make the raid perform a lot better. There are other classes like Feral Druid, which definitely you can make a case for to have in your raid. I had a Feral Druid in my raid for a little while, who was basically the third hybrid tank, and then, bosses where I didn't need a third tank, he would just DPS, which made out pretty well. He was a good player. But yeah, there are definitely specs where mathematics and parsers or whatever say, you're not worth the spot.
All right. Now, recently on the show, we've been tackling a few of the specs, and I've had a few theory crafters on who have really been trying to challenge long-held vanilla values and stereotypes in relation to things like boomkin and also, even if you go your sort of quote-unquote meme specs like your Ret Paladins and Ellie Shamans and things like that. Some of the number crunchers have been getting their sort of teeth stuck into these classes, looking to see if there is a sense of viability, and they have discovered that by their numbers that there is a case if the player has a certain amount of skill and obviously the right gear. So if hypothetically a player were to come along to you and say, no, I know you don't like boomkins, but I'm fucking awesome at boomkins and I've got the right gear and I've got the right pots, would you consider me? Would you ever think about it, or is it still just, no, I'm sorry, I'm just stuck in my ways?
So the two classes and the two specs I mentioned, which was, I believe, Ret Paladin and Boomkin, as a guild that I was Alliance on the last server. Those two specs, no matter the player, consumables, anything, you're going to get beat by every class, every person in the raid in terms of DPS, and you're not going to bring enough intangibles to the raid where I should replace you, or should replace one of those people with you. Now, going back to Feral Druid and even Shadow Priest, those are two things. Those are the kinds of things that I ask myself when I'm interviewing or looking through applications or talking to potential recruits that are Shadow Priests or the Feral Druid I brought in before actually bringing them in. So those things are very important to me. But in terms of class and specs, there are certain ones that are just straight up no, but the ones where I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask myself these questions before I bring them in, Shadow Priest and Feral Druid, I feel like are fair specs in classes where if you have a certain amount of skill and pots and gear, etc., I feel like you can earn a spot in a raid for sure.
Do you feel like that's something, a mindset of yours that could potentially change if more figures come out when Classic releases?
If they were based on, what we've been playing on private servers for the last 7 years, no. But if they were to, change talents or retune things, I'd absolutely be open to it. But there's just, the information's out there about elemental shamans and red paladins and, all those sorts of things. I mean, there might be certain fights where they flourish on, but overall, for the raid, they just do not fit in a hardcore raiding environment.
Okay. Now, you briefly mentioned just then, obviously, as a guild leader, you pore over applications and you interview people and things like that. Can you just give people a little bit of an insight as a guild leader of a hardcore raiding guild and sort of a notorious raiding guild, what you personally go through when selecting people to come on board and what you sort of use as a qualifier to run with you and your team?
So the absolute first thing I look for, and we have a lot of questions, not a lot of questions, like a few questions in our application. I don't really care about experience. I don't really care about that kind of thing. I look at your UI. I ask people to take a screenshot of their UI and, post a imager and then post the link. It's the first thing I look for. I can usually tell by someone's UI whether or not they're a good player. Keybinds, etc. Other important add-ons for certain classes. You can usually tell right then and there that this person's a good player. And then after that, I'll look at, parses on legacy players or in the past realm players. To look at, sort of numbers compared to people in my guild or people, that they raided with. And then there's other questions. I usually don't really care too much about the other questions until I sit somebody down in a Discord. It's kind of like an informal Discord conversation. I talk to people. I kind of just want to get the feel of whether or not they'd be a fit in the guild. Someone who can listen, someone who's not going to, spurg out, do things that will hurt the guild in any sort of way. But yeah, those are the most important things that I look for in terms of recruiting players to my guild.
Outside of going out and getting yourself a decent UI, is there any one tip that you would give to players out there who are just dying to be a part of a hardcore raiding guild in terms of their application, in terms of their interview? Is there something they could say that would really grab your attention as a guild leader?
Nothing specific, but putting effort into applications just generally is definitely something I like to see. I have a question, for example, in there. It's like, tell me about your class. And if you have like a one sentence thing, that's not impressive at all. Go do if you're not sure of, your rotation or, your consumables, go do the research, put it in that box. I don't care if you I guess copy and paste would be kind of shitty, but, show me that you've done the work to try to research your class and, show that you really care about playing the game to join my guild. Put the effort in, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
All right. So are you saying that as a rogue, if I were to apply to be a part of Grizzly and you said, tell me about your class, and I replied to you, my name is Stabby McStabface and I like to stabby stab stab stab, you're saying that wouldn't be enough?
No. I've gotten things like that many times. No, that wouldn't be enough. Tell me, your opener and, what you do on this boss or that boss, or et cetera. Just, give me something that shows me that you actually care about, putting up good damage and helping the raid.
Okay. Now, I know it's hard to say again because, as we mentioned, different raids will require different makeups. But do you have a general ideal raid build in terms of percentage of healers, percentage of tanks? Like, do you go, I don't care where we're going, we're not going anywhere without at least 7 healers or without at least 4 or 5 tanks, whatever it might be? What do you look to?
So, that kind of changes across the raids, the different raids in vanilla. I'll try to, be as concise as possible, but in MC and BWL, doesn't really matter. You don't really need any more than like 8 healers. Once you, have your pre-bis and, some raid gear, 8 to 10 healers. If you have any more than that, that's fine. I wouldn't go above like 12 healers max for those 2 raids. And then if you want to put out good damage, the best possible damage, go majority melee. Melee just does an insane amount of damage in comparison to any sort of range class in the first 2 raids. Excuse me. And then in terms of tanks, you pretty much always want to have at least 2, and then you're probably going to need, there's some fights that require 3 or 4 or 5. So if you have warriors in your raid that have, pre-bis tanking gear, any sort of tanking gear, they need to throw on a shield and a sword and, tank a couple of fights, trash. That's pretty helpful. But yeah, it definitely changes in AQ. You might want to bring, an extra healer or 2 in AQ, maybe, subtract some melee and add some mages and maybe a couple warlocks, because that's when casters start getting stronger. And then in Nax, subtract even more melee, add some more casters, add a few healers. Like in Nax, believe we went up to 12 healers, which is pretty standard. And then for Saffron, I think we had 15 or 16 healers, which is pretty necessary. It's a very healing intensive, damage heavy fight. And then on KT, you want to subtract as much melee as possible. So it really changes. What I'm trying to say is it really changes across, each raid.
Now, what's the craziest makeup that you can remember taking along to a raid? Did you ever get drunk behind the wheel one night and say, fuck it, we're going with 18 healers tonight?
Not on purpose. A lot of the times, in guilds, you don't really have the luxury of choosing exactly, what comp you want per night, even if you're drunk or whatever. But I have seen other guilds just take like 6 groups of melee, 7 groups of melee. I was in a speed run on Chronos where we had, I think, I want to say like 6 healers, like 2 range DPS, 2 tanks, and the rest melee DPS. Everything just melted. So that's probably the craziest thing I've been a part of personally.
All right, we've covered raiding in general. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go through the major raids and have a few blanket questions about all of them. So as we do, I'll start with Molten Core, and we'll go through a few more. But I'll read you the following post from user Dark Phenomenon over at the WoW Classic subreddit, who says the following under the topic of, so you think Molten Core is going to be easy? And they say the following. Even if you don't think it's going to be easy, I just have a question for you. Not an argument on why I think it will or won't be easy, but looking at all guilds that have stepped foot in Molten Core 4 months after Classic has launched, let's say, what percentage of them do you think will have cleared Molten Core versus those that are still progressing through it? I'm actually curious and quite undecided myself, as I don't really know how many mediocre players will be able to stomach wading through 59 levels plus pre-raid gearing. I'd guess anywhere between 50 to 85% of those guilds will have cleared Molten Core by then, so I'm going to go with a midpoint as my guess at 66%, so 2/3 of guilds. I'll come back and bookmark this thread and check in 4 months and see where we're at. So my question to you, AK, is, in terms of Molten Core, let's say that they don't retune anything. Do you think that here we are 14 years later, or perhaps if it comes next year, 15 years later with Classic, the majority or the vast majority of raid running guilds will face roll Molten Core?
Yes. Molten Core is just really, really easy. There's really no, hard check fights in Molten Core. I wouldn't say that would happen until PWL, where, some guilds might get stuck in certain places. So, Molten Core would be really, really easy for pretty much every guild that steps in there. You might wipe to a couple of bosses like Luciferon or, Magmadar just to figure out things. But if you're not clearing Molten Core within like 2 or 3 weeks of, entering there as like a more casual guild, then, I don't think the guild will last.
Okay. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't somewhat categorize this in terms of, let's talk Molten Core with 1.12 talents and itemization, a la the private server experience, versus Molten Core, let's say, I don't know, it's hard to say because we don't know what they're going to retune it if they did, make it a bit more difficult. So let's go door number 1. And the private server experience with the 1.12 talents and itemization, opening the door to, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Classic players. What percentage do you think will easily go through Molten Core with that particular scenario?
I don't even think that the gate will be Molten Core by any means. I think a lot of people are going to quit out while they're leveling. It takes a lot of time and effort to level, and it is a huge burnout for a lot of people, especially when you're, in the zerg of players of, trying to tag mobs and level as quick as possible. People are going to get burnt out really, really quickly there. As far as, the percentage of players that are going to hit 60 and clear Molten Core, I think it's going to be very, very small. Because I think, if we're talking about the percentage of players that actually start and have an intention on playing Classic, it would be very, very small. I don't think a lot of people will hit 60. I think if you do hit 60, you're probably going to clear Molten Core. So that would be a high percentage. If people hit 60 and, they're into playing the game, they're going to more than likely clear Molten Core. But like I said, going back to what I said, I don't think a lot of people are going to hit 60. It's a lot of time, and a lot of people aren't used to that kind of thing.
Now, I appreciate that the next question I'm going to ask could have sort of a long, protracted answer or a million different answers, but I obviously keep hearing that, and keep in mind, obviously, when I ask this question, as I said, I haven't rated, so you're talking to a complete noob in terms of rating, but you hear a lot that Molten Core is going to be so easy. Oh my God, we're going to face roll it if they give us the 1.12 talents and itemization. Here's the one thing I don't see being answered directly a lot is why? What specific examples are there of why Molten Core is such a laugh with those talents and items?
So, in comparing, 1.12 and, earlier patches, if you go to, any server right now that's, high populated vanilla, like, Northdale or Lightbringer or Kronos, all of the items there are itemized to be whatever patch it is, 1.3, 1.2. They just don't have stats that really help you in a raid. So it makes things a little more difficult, but I don't think it'll make a huge, huge difference. Talent-wise, we haven't seen any private servers revert their talents to, I think it's because it's client side, it's back to, 1.1 or 1.2, where there were certain things that just made classes either useless or just extremely, extremely overpowered. So I feel like it could make things interesting if Blizzard were to, revert talents back to 1.1 or 1.2. It could, because that, creates a whole new ball game of theory crafting and such. But in terms of 1.12 talents and gear, it's just too easy. That everything is just, that's really when Blizzard started to really, turn things on and, make things work for raids. Basically, you just get a lot of help from those things that help you clear raids like Molten Core to BWO.
Out of interest, do you remember the first time that you downed Ragnaros? Oh
yeah, for sure.
Now, I'm going to ask, just because it does seem to be a bit of a watershed moment or a really fond memory for most players that obviously do that for the first time. How would you explain how you felt that day?
Oh, it was incredible. I remember downloading, back then YouTube wasn't a thing, downloading videos or what have you on like LimeWire or Napster or whatever, of guilds killing Ragnaros and just looking and seeing, the end boss in the game at the time being downed. And, not a lot of guilds had downed it at the time. So it was just amazing to see. It's such an accomplishment for guilds back then because it took a lot of effort because nobody had any sort of clue when it came to theory crafting and such. So all the effort comes together right there. And once you down the boss, it's like, wow, this is great. All this effort that I put into, Molten Core, Ragnaros, or, hitting 60 is, coming to an end. This is great. And, I'm happy that this is paying off. We're all so happy right now. So, I had a very similar feeling. I didn't hit, 60 in time for my guild's first Ragnaros kill on retail, but I have been a part of many, first Ragnaros kills or, first anything kills on, other servers, such as Nestarius or Lightbringer. Killing Ragnaros is just like the end-all be-all of so much effort you put into leveling really fast and gearing really fast and doing so many different things and preparing. It's just a huge rush of emotions and so much lifted off your shoulders at that time.
Okay, now we'll move along to Blackwing Lair now, and I just want to read you, just bear with me through the following quote from over at the WoW Classic official forums with user Sniper Ace, who says this. First off, I'm not asking for them to retune raids for smaller sizes or anything like that, but the best PvE guild on my server back in vanilla would often raid Molten Core, Blackwing Lair, and AQ40 with 30 to 35 people. Unfortunately, they died when Nax came out, the main tank who got the Scarab mounts and legendaries transferred off of our low population realm to go clear Nax with the top guild on some high pop server. Anyway, just wanted to give some preface that raiding with less than 40 people was a thing back in vanilla. There are many positives along with some negatives. Positives: less competition for gear, smaller team to manage for the raid leader, raid team gets geared up quicker, and artificially makes the content harder since you have less people. Negatives: losing one well-geared tank or healer will affect the group more since you have less people. There's more pressure on individual players, longer time to clear raids, and only able to work in Molten Core / Blackwing layer, and maybe AQ40 if you're a top-tier guild. This is a very old game, so if the raids become optimized, then I think having a smaller raid team would be a fun endeavor. Looking to hear anyone's thoughts on this. Here's my question for you, AK. Have you ever done a Blackwing lair run with less than 40 people?
Almost too many times. I have way too many times, unfortunately.
Okay, so what's the fewest amount of people that you've done BWL with?
Close to 30, maybe a little less than 30, maybe like 28 or 29.
Wow. So what would you say? I presume it's an exercise that's not for the faint of heart. If a guild were considering mixing things up a bit and going, you know what, let's go crazy and let's make this a little bit tougher and go with perhaps 30 people tonight, what would you suggest they keep in mind when attempting that for the first time?
I don't think that if they don't have a lot of good gear, they wouldn't really be getting very far. Maybe even not past the first boss, but certainly probably not past the second boss. It's really hard to do with minimal gear. So in certain scenarios, like if they were to have gear, I mean, there's definitely things that, you got to take a lot of precautions with, such as suppression room or, doing certain bosses and, like Razor Gore and kiting mobs, and there's just so many different things you got to keep in mind. But I guess it all really depends on, what gear level you have. I've never really done, I've never done BW well, I guess, with, 30 or so people without having like any sort of, good gear to where I really have to change a lot of things from my normal strategy for downing pretty much any of the bosses. I feel like it would definitely be interesting for any guild. I guess it could definitely, mix things up per se. If you were to enter BWL with, 30 people or less than 30 people, it could definitely provide a challenge. But yeah, go back to answer the question that you asked. You definitely need to change some things if you don't have good gear. There's definitely a lot of things you could change.
So maybe that's the point, that if by chance my rogue stabby McStab face happened to convince you to get into Grizzly and I put my hand up for the 30-man run on BWL and I had the one green item, that's the point where you say, go fuck yourself.
I would never turn pretty much anybody down in a raid if I have less than 40 people, but you wouldn't really be helping very much.
Okay, all right. Now, just on Blackwing Lair in general, I find, and tell me if you somewhat agree with this or you've got any thoughts on this, it seems to be a relatively beloved raid, but I don't see it get talked about a whole lot. Why do you think that is?
Are you saying in terms of the WoW classic, forums, official forums? Or are you talking about from, the private server scene or, those sorts of people?
Yeah, just on the forums online generally. Like I hear a lot of Molten Core chat. You get the AQ chat. You get for some reason, a shitload of Nax chat, considering no one's ever fucking been there. But nobody really seems to talk about BWL.
So I can tell you from like a veteran private server point of view, people don't really talk a lot about BWL because, you could say it's the middle child syndrome, but I guess it's just because people just have done it for so long. And I mean, you could also answer Molten Core with the same thing, but Molten Core is the first raid, and that's the first raid that's out. And, that's what people are looking forward to when they're leveling. So I could see why people would talk about that. But BWL is the middle child, and people on private servers have been stuck, before, a year or two ago doing MC and BWL and ZG over and over and over and looking forward to doing AQ and doing NAX. It wasn't until recently where we've had the luxury of servers actually putting out those raids. It wasn't a luxury before, so that would be how I would answer that question. I guess it depends on the point of view, whether it's from somebody who hasn't played Classic before or people have been playing privates for a while. But that's my perspective from someone who's been playing for a while.
Okay, so with Grizzly being obviously a veteran raiding guild by this stage, as you say, you might not be doing it now, but you rolled through, you did Nax once, you retired after that and said you were taking a break. But is there a point now where if you got the gang together and you did a BWL run, is it a yawn fest for you guys, or are there still a couple of moments where you get a little bit of sweat on the brow and go, oh shit, we better pay attention here?
There's definitely certain points in the instance that you need to be on your A game. I guess you could say, for example, like Chromagus, you could say, you kind of have to have people on the ball there in the beginning just to figure out, which breaths you're going to get, and, moving out for the breaths and, which ones you stay in for, et cetera. There's definitely moments that you can't really face roll everything. You kind of need to pay attention.
Okay. Now, just out of interest, what's your favorite encounter in Blackwing Lair?
I think Veil is definitely a very unique encounter. And I think Razorgore is up there close as well. They're two pretty unique encounters. Fairly difficult as well.
All right. We'll move along now to AQ, and I'll read you this one from a user named Mad Dog Mike. And this was actually a post from mid-2008. So keep that in mind because it'll probably make the post make a bit more sense. And Mad Dog Mike says the following. My guild recently went into AQ 40 for grins, and man, that place seems insane even at our overgunned level 70. We couldn't even beat the Twin Emperors. They kept running too close to each other and refusing to move apart. That, plus the ads, who would obviously have been obscene at level 60, would have driven us to madness if we'd been trying to run it as intended. How the heck did any of you folks that did it stand that instance? So, my question from that is, again, we talk about difficulty. Are there moments in AQ40 that will make Grizzly sweat, or is it a bit of a breeze?
So on Lightbringer, I guess you could say there were two fights that made you sweat. The first one was Scarum, which is the first boss in the instance. Basically what happens is he randomly mind controls two people, and they are basically enraged and do a shit ton of damage. They move kind of slow, but if they end up getting on somebody for like more than a second, they're dead. And then you also have to interrupt Scarum and his images or whatever, so that he does an arcane explosion like half the room. So if you don't do all those things, you end up having a really bad time. And then at the end, at 25%, he spawns, another two images and himself, and you kind of have to figure out, which one's the real one, so you just zerg it down and kill it as quick as possible. There's been times where we have had some bad calls from people making those calls, which one's the real one, and we, zerg it down, and then all of a sudden we're like, shit, why isn't the encounter over? Well, we just zerged down the wrong one. And then, arcane explosions are going off, people are dying, people are getting mind controlled, etc. The other bosses in there are pretty much a breeze. Twin Imps, even now, is a breeze. Going back to, Classic or Vanilla or TBC and trying to go back there and do it, I can see why it can be difficult. But definitely Cthulhu, the beginning of Cthulhu is always a sweat because you never know, after the second beam on somebody, and it goes on to a third random person. It could be anybody in the raid, and we're not sure whether or not that person's paying attention, if they're going to run out of the raid, or keep running with the raid and get everybody chained and die. So, fortunately, after the first couple of weeks, we never wiped on Cthulhu again, because people are actually paying attention. But every time we did it, it was a sweat.
You mentioned Cthulhu, and I'm sure that you know the faux pas that Blizzard committed when they first released AQ, and it was proven obviously by, I believe it was Ian Hazakostas actually, that Cthulhu was mathematically impossible to down upon first release. But then after the nerfing of Cthulhu, do you feel that they went too far with the nerfing? Would you have wished that they just dialed it down a fraction less as opposed to what they did?
So the parts that made it actually quote-unquote impossible were the fact that in Phase 2 you'd have tentacles, like the giant eye tentacle or the giant claw tentacle, spawning in walls and just not spawning on people, and then also spawning in Cthulhu's stomach, which all of that just literally makes it impossible. But mathematically, it is possible. You just have to have really insanely good RNG back then. Based on, all the game knowledge we have now, to me, it would be possible to do if you had good RNG, to where you don't have that shit spawning in the stomach. Because if it spawns in the stomach, then there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. What was the second part of your question? So
the second part was, do you feel that if they were to retune AQ40, let's say for Classic, or do you wish we had a scenario where they didn't nerf it as much as they did? Do you wish it was a bit of a halfway point between what it was and what it became?
Yeah, so going back to what I was saying before, they did nerf some of the health values. I don't think that was necessary at all. The only things they really need to fix were the tentacles spawning in the correct spots. Other than that, it should have been possible. But back then, you didn't have a lot of game knowledge. You didn't have everyone using flasks and all that to, min-max. So it seemed pretty impossible at the time, so they needed to tune it to where some guilds could kill it. But I feel like back then, based on the game knowledge, they did a good job. A lot of guilds, including, my own, we had never even got to Cthulhu, but a lot of guilds just went straight in the Nax and just skipped Cthulhu because they didn't think they could do it. So I feel like they did a good job.
Do you feel that AQ40 for Classic, as perhaps it did back in the day, will still represent a large speed bump for hardcore guilds in terms of really determining how hardcore they are? Will it separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak?
I feel like AQ is a good start for that, but I don't think that it would be a huge... Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. He cares about AQ.
Yeah, apparently he cares about AQ. So now I remember what I was saying. I feel like some guilds might, take a little bit longer, but I don't think that it will, ultimately block a guild completely, like kind of it did on retail. Like, my guild wasn't the only guild that got stuck on Twin Imps. A lot of guilds were stuck on Twin Imps. A lot of guilds never even killed Cthulhu and were killing multiple bosses in next. But I do feel like it's a good start to having more difficult raid content. But Nax would definitely be the end-all, be-all there.
Okay, well, let's get to the end-all, be-all, as you put it, and we talk about this rarefied air that is Naxxramas. I just want to take you to a back and forth that I found again on the WoW Classic subreddit, and we'll start with the same user that I mentioned much earlier in the show, Eats Pandas, who says the following. Naxxramas, I cleared one wing in vanilla. Mana conservation, threat management, max DPS, all things that had to be accounted for. It was very difficult. It was tuned for players to have max buffs and consumables and perfect execution. I want that in Classic. I want cruel Nax. I want it to mean something. And then we got this reply from a user, Manatee de Derp, who says this. No, it wasn't. It was tuned for people being around the skill level they were back then. By no stretch did you need perfect execution or world buffs or whatever. You needed to be coordinated and have a minimum level of gear, and preferably resistance pots for certain fights. I'm getting tired of this Nax was so extremely difficult hyperbole. It was difficult because maintaining a roster of 40 players eligible for Nax was a hassle. So, my question for you, AK, is let's either bunk or debunk some myths about the difficulty of Nax. What say you? Nax, hard or not?
Majority for a guild like mine and myself, the majority not hard, but there are definitely a few fights that are hard. I, for the most part, agree with the replier to Eats Pandas. I don't remember his name, but I feel like they both have a point, but the reply definitely has a much better point. Based on the knowledge back then, it was hard, but going into that now with the knowledge that we have now, it wouldn't be all too hard.
Okay, well that reply also mentioned that there probably is no need for world buffs through Nax. What would you have to say about that?
There isn't. My guild cleared it without world buffs. A few guilds, I think on Lightbringer there was a great number of guilds that entered Nax, maybe like 30 or so. And I think less than 10 ended up killing Kil'Thuzad without world buffs. So basically what Light's Hope did was they disabled world buffs in Nax. Like once you enter Nax, all of your, if you attempted to go in there with any sort of world buffs, they all were kicked off. So they did that for like a few weeks, so like a month or so. And then you were free to go in there with world buffs. And that just makes things so much easier, and things go so much faster. But yeah, it's certainly doable without world buffs because I've done it myself.
Okay, and again, perhaps qualifying this question with the fact that let's talk about Grizzly here. Do you agree that if Grizzly were running Nax, that the resistance pot thing is only preferable and not mandatory?
There are definitely fights, at least one, where it is 100% mandatory. That would be Lotheb. You need greater shadow protection potions on Lotheb. Unless you have world buffs and the most insane DPS in the world, you need shadow protection potions on that fight. You cannot get through that fight without it.
All right, so I'll put to you the following hypothetical situation, and we'll come back to my my character as Stabby McStabface. And let's say, again, we're in the hypothetical situation where I've somehow applied successfully to be a part of Grizzly in Classic, and I've made it all the way through and I'm up to Nax. And let's say that I am a competent player and I've got all my gear. However, I don't have the time to farm for shit, AK. Can I still run with you through Nax, or will I get a firm thanks but no thanks?
Going back, a little while ago, having somebody in the raid for the most part is better than not having somebody in the raid. 40 is better than 39, I guess. There really wouldn't be any fights where if you didn't have a consumable where it would cost you, or cost the raid, I should say, completely. Like, you wouldn't wipe the raid because you didn't have consumables. Would you hurt the raid if you weren't using consumables? For sure. Less DPS is always going to hurt the raid. But, going back to your last question, on a fight like Lotheb, if you don't have your greater shadow protection potions, you're not going to wipe the raid. Initially, you might cost us right at the end when the boss is at like 2 or 1%, but because you didn't use your consumables, we didn't have your DPS for so long. But ultimately, yeah, I would rather have you in the raid than not have you in the raid. I'd like to have 40 people instead of 39.
Okay, and on that note, have you ever done Nax with less than 40 people?
I believe we might have had like 38 or 39 for a couple of bosses. But for the most part, I believe we had 40.
Okie dokie. Now, here's the big one. What do you think about post-Nax content for World of Warcraft Classic? Is that something you're interested in or not at all?
So I love itemization. I love the talents. I love everything about classic World of Warcraft. From what I understand, from what I've read and seen videos on, they initially didn't have plans to have Burning Crusade. They were just going to keep going with vanilla for a while, and they had plans for instances like Karazhan was going to be a vanilla raid, Deathwing, Hyjal, all vanilla raids. So I feel like it could make things more interesting to have, new content that people aren't familiar with from private servers or can watch, videos and learn things about, and just play without any of that information and try to figure things out. I feel like that could make things really interesting. So I would be for that for sure.
Okay, so if I were to suggest to you, hey, AK, I'm from Blizzard. Guess what we're planning for Classic? We're going to do about, I don't know, a year or so after Nax, or 6 months, whatever it might be, we're going to drop the proposed Emerald Dream Raid. And guess what? It's going to be about 1.5 times as hard as Nax. It's still very doable, but it's going to take you months of frustrating work to get through. But then you'll be on top of the pile. If I said something like that, is that basically the equivalent of throwing you a Viagra right now? Are you just raging, going, fuck yes?
Yeah, pretty much. At the same time, it would probably have like maybe a few people like in my guild or, a lot of other guilds end up not doing it just because it kind of sounds like you need to be doing a lot of gold and consumable farming, which is not an easy thing to do in vanilla for a lot of people. So, but yeah, it's definitely a Viagra. You threw a Viagra at me right there.
Okay. Now, settle down, big guy. All right, settle down. Let's get back
okay,
on track. So throw that cold water in your face. Here we go. Back to Naxxramas. Just one last question just to tie off on that one. And I've asked you about all of them, but perhaps I'll rephrase this one slightly. As a guild leader, are there any major headaches that Nax still presents to you? Not talking about necessarily bosses that you might struggle with, but more getting the guild together or barking instructions during a certain boss that people still sometimes annoyingly don't follow. What's it like as a guild leader through Nax?
So let me give you a little bit of a history of my guild on Lightbringer and Nax. So, a lot of guilds did this thing called, they hosted their own realm, their own box. People called it like a PTR, where they practice all the bosses and all the trash. So when they went into, when Lightbringer released it, that they'd be familiar with everything. So my guild didn't do that. We felt as though we wanted to experience it, firsthand and see how well we could do. The first week we cleared everything up to 4 Horsemen, which was 12 out of 15 bosses. There were only, I think, one boss, maybe 2, where we wiped like more than once or twice. And then the second week we went in there, we killed everything in the first night up to 4 Horsemen. And then the second night we went in, we killed 4 Horsemen. Saffron had some attempts on Kel'Thuzad. And the next night we went in and we killed it within like an hour of being online. So going back on what I just said, we don't have a lot of experience with every boss in there. We've only done, the majority of fights twice. But thinking back on it, if we were still raiding there would definitely be, a couple fights. I think I mentioned before Lotheb where, okay, I really hope that this person brought their Shadow Protection potions. I really hope this person, actually pops it at the right time. What else is there? Trying to think through the fights. Gothic. I hope this person, shackles at the right time. Want to ask them to shackle and hope this person sheeps. four horsemen, I hope this person's rotating at the right time. If they're not rotating at the right time, they're going to fuck everything up. I hope this person moves during void zones and, spreads out for the holy rats. But yeah, they're definitely headaches. In comparison to AQ and Cthulhu, I would say Cthulhu would probably be more of a raid headache for me, starting the fight, than it would be for the majority of things in Nex. So, but yeah, ultimately, there would definitely be some headaches.
Okay. Now, just back to sort of more general tact again. And do you have any tips for beginning guilds in Nax if they've never obviously, as we say, it's rarefied air. Let's say they've knocked on the door for the first time. You've talked about the shadow protection pots and they're an absolute must-have. Is there anything else that you would say you probably don't know this is coming, but just be ready for this?
Generally, I would suggest to beginner, guilds that haven't done Nax before to, have the members actually, view some of the fights to kind of be familiar with what's going on, or have a raid leader that actually knows what he's talking about. I didn't make it mandatory by any means for any of my guild to, watch videos or do anything like that, because I was confident in my raid leading abilities. I can explain things pretty well to everybody in the raids where they're like, okay, I'm really comfortable with this going to this fight. I mean, to where, I'm not worried. I think we can kill this. So, for beginner guilds, I would say to generally just watch videos or read up on things, or for the guild leader to, put together a list of consumables that people need to bring. And then, when you get to the fight, be like, okay, it's time to use these consumables. Look at this list for this fight. Use this. Even the trash. Don't even forget about the trash. There's definitely trash in there that can wipe you. Don't forget to research the trash, as a guild leader or raid leader, and tell your, raid about each, trash mob before you start and how they work, because you can wipe. Unlike, maybe even Molten Core, the majority of trash mobs in there are not going to wipe you, even if, you're an idiot. So, just generally just try to do research, as a raider, minimally, maybe watch some fights, but as a raid leader, it's your job to, read up on every single fight, all the trash mobs, know about everything, where the best place to tank it is, all that sorts of thing. So it's up to you ultimately as a raid leader, but it helps if you have your raid actually, know somewhat what's going on before going into an encounter.
Now, just back to sort of guild management in general. You mentioned at the very top of the interview, and this might well be the answer to this next question, but you mentioned that you had, it was an awful moment. You went through a bit of unpleasantness when you had the original breakup and reformation of Grizzly. And my question basically is perhaps keeping that in mind, or it might be something else. The role of guild leader can be somewhat of a thankless one at times. Do you find that you've come across a moment where you've had a really, really poor experience with players or drama that you really sort of look back on and go, fuck, that was a horrible moment?
Yeah. So in Nax, actually, on Kel'Thuzad, I think it was like our second to last attempt before we killed the boss, or one of the last attempts before we killed the boss. One specific moment was going into Nax. Right now, back then on, Lightbringer, I had two other officers, one newer one and one I had for a decent while. And the one newer one was doing a lot of work with, basically using the guild bank's money to provide consumables for people and, among a lot of other things. And the other officer wasn't really doing anything at all. So that kind of was pissing me off a little bit. And on Kel'Thuzad, he barked out something, towards the end that kind of fucked us over a little bit. And I lost my shit at him. And it was probably not one of my prouder moments. I probably should have kept my cool there, but just the amount of work that I put in just to see like, one, bad call from somebody who shouldn't be saying anything, probably costs a kill, maybe, costs us a kill, was very, very tilting to me. And I lost my shit, and I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have kept cool. But yeah, that's definitely something I could, see as a regret, more recently.
Inversely, now I am a bit of a fan of fun guild drama stories. Can you think of any moments in your experience as a guild leader, where you can look back on a bit of guild drama now and absolutely laugh?
Yeah, there's definitely, I'm sure every guild has gone through, funny things. But there's definitely some things that you can look back and, try to laugh on. But there's definitely other things where you look back and you're just like, that was such a terrible thing. Just the other day I was talking to, some people about something that happened. I was like, you know what? Let's just not even talk about this, because it's not worth the time. We don't need to argue about this. It happened, and let's just move on. There's no point. We agree to disagree. So yeah, there's definitely some things where you can look back and, poke fun at, but there's definitely other things where it's just like, all right, let's just move on.
Okay. Now, what are your thoughts on private server first, such as, I'm not sure if you saw the one that we got the other day on Northdale, where I believe within 10 days of launch, obviously a guild has downed Molten Core. Now, I know that the cries of shenanigans and things that the community goes through when they talk about private server world first and things like that, when they go, well, are they getting boosts? Are they getting help from the GMs? What are they doing? Blah, blah, blah. What do you think of that, and does it mean much to you when you see that?
I've seen that, all too many times as, a raider in that environment. You can't do anything special on a private server without someone crying wolf about something. I'm actually in that guild as a social, just leveling. Progress is the name of the guild, who killed, MC. I think it was like 10 days. I think you're 10 or 11, 9, 10, 11 days, one of those, after launch is extremely, extremely impressive work by them. Hats off to them for what they did. But yeah, there's a huge Reddit thread about the loot they got and, how they were able to actually do it. There's always people that just come up with just the craziest stuff. I think someone ended up like making a spreadsheet about like, the chances that they had, with the loot that they got, just some ridiculous stuff. No one almost ever just congratulates them and, gives them, a job well done, statement. There's always some sort of cry, on every server for every kill, for, everything. Just that's just how it is in private servers. Sad to say. There's always some sort of corruption or, something or other.
Okay. Now, just lastly, out of interest, obviously you, as I said at the very top of the interview, I came across you after you commented on my interview with Alex Sensual many months ago. And just to wrap this one up almost before we get to the fun stuff, having had Alex in the guilds, have you felt that that's brought the guilds any extra attention, be it positive or negative, in terms of the private server community?
Certainly had a lot of negative. There's a lot of people that don't like Alex. I can see why. Like in the beginning with Alex, I wasn't really a fan of him. Then his content started to get a little better, and I think he, started to raid and, do a lot of things that kind of changed his perspective on things. Then when he joined the guild, I talked to the guy, and he's actually a really, really nice, and he's a cool guy. Not everyone's perfect. Obviously, he has flaws, but he does get a lot of hate, and it does bring a lot of hate to the guild. But at the same time, it also brings views, like on Twitch. Oh, I want to see Alex raid, and I want to see him fuck up, or him do well, or whatnot. Even the Kel'Thuzad video I did, he actually produced the video for me, and I basically directed, and he produced. He brings a lot of things to the table. I really like Alex. But I can see why people don't. I was in your position before, but I do feel like his content has got better, and him as a person, for the most part, he's a really good guy. So I'm happy to have him in the guild.
No, not a problem. I agree. When Alex is on track talking about World of Warcraft, I really enjoy his content. I'm with you in that regards. Now, in terms of the direction of that video, are you going to be hanging out for an invite to the Oscars anytime soon, or what do you reckon?
Yeah, we're actually pretty proud of how the video came out. I think the only real complaint was the music, but well, let's just put it this way. I feel like you're probably a lot happier with the music that this is the second cut because the first music wasn't very good. So just be happy with what you have.
All right. Well, you've made it through the meat of the interview, AK. You've done so well. Now it's time for the fun stuff, and we'll quickly wrap it all up. We'll start with now it's time for anger management. Each interview on the show, I ask the interviewee to get a bit of anger off their chest. So, AK, I'll ask you, is there anything about World of Warcraft that really gives you the shits that you just want to get angry about?
Man, as a raid leader, let me tell you something. I absolutely hate when random raiders just call out stupid things and just end up wiping the raid or just causing harm somehow to the raid. It just pisses me the fuck off when people do that. It's really, really grinds my gears when people do that.
You know what really grinds my gears?
If you really want to piss me off, that's something you do, but I'm just going to kick you from the guild if you continually do it. So that's something that pisses me off big time as a raid leader.
All right, on that track, what's the worst or most misinformed thing you've heard someone yell out during a raid?
Man, I guess going back to, what happened on Kel'Thuzad, my fellow officer, he made a really, really dumb call out that, probably caused us to wipe, but that's the most recent thing I can remember, but there's been so many different things, and I've raided for so long, that one sticks out to me from recently.
Were they saying stuff like, get in the fire, get in the fire?
Nothing that stupid. Basically, there's a mechanic. There's a mechanic on Kel'Thuzad where he mind controls the tank and like 3 other people. So what you do is you have to stop damage so that the other off tanks can pick up the boss after the mind control goes off because the threat resets. The boss is at like 15% or something, and basically he called out to keep doing damage and not to stop, and mind control went off and the boss went all around the room and started one-shot people. So that was a really bad call.
All right. Now with that anger out of the way, now it's time for the hot seat. Each episode, I put the interviewee on the hot seat and ask a few fun, hypothetical questions about the game. So, AK, you ready for this?
Ready to go?
All right. Now, you're familiar with the game Fuck, Marry, Kill?
Yes.
All right. Now, I'm going to give you 3 options here, AK, and I want you to give me fuck, marry, or kill. And the first one is the first time that you dinged 60. Next, the first time you downed KT. Or the first time you had sex. Fuck, marry, kill.
I guess I would say I would kill the first time I hit 60. I would fuck first time I had sex. And I would marry the first time I killed Kel'Thuzad.
All right, that's how important it was to you. I love it. Excellent.
Man, it's been 13, 14 years I've been trying to do that, so it was something special.
Excellent. See, now if you had have asked me that question, my response to you would be, well, now you're just implying that I've had sex. All right, so my next question is, what's the easiest way to get kicked out of Grizzly?
Oh, man.
Would it be to badmouth
drama.
Yeah?
No, I've had people badmouth me and I've kept them in the guild, but definitely causing drama is a good way to get kicked out of the guild.
All right. What's the easiest way to get invited to Grizzly? Would it be perhaps to rub you up the right way?
Be a girl. No, I'm just kidding. I've had a lot of bad experience with girls in my guild, but I do have girls in the guild who are really, really good players, and I love having them around, but definitely had others where they're just
what, guild drama?
Looking for drama, trying to, suck up to the loot master, all that. But the easiest way to get in is to know somebody that can vouch for you. If someone in the guild who I trust vouches for you, that's pretty much all I really need.
Okay.
So know somebody and impress them so they can vouch for you.
What's the meanest thing you've ever said to someone as guild leader of Grizzly, whether it's to an applicant or a current member?
The meanest thing? Not so sure it's the meanest that I can think of off the top of my head, but we had a guy apply, I guess I should call him a kid, apply to the guild, and we had him in for an interview, and basically in his application he had an insane application. He rated the top level in retail, in top guilds. And apparently he was a top blend League of Legends player who did a tryout for Team Solo Mid. So we started asking him questions about this, and he gave answers, but then we were like, okay, man, we don't really care about these things that much. I mean, they look good on your, application or your resume or whatever, but cough up some proof. We need to see this. When people claim these sorts of things, we need to know that they actually did them. We don't really care that you did them, but we need to know that you actually did. And the kid strung us on for an hour and photoshopped a couple things and sent us images, and I was like, look, man, just get the fuck out of here. I've given you so many chances to, I told the kid, I was like, look, you can just come clean right now and tell us. And he just refused to. And I was like, just get the fuck out of here. I'm done with you. You need to just move the fuck on. So I kicked him out of TeamSpeak, and he messaged me a couple days later. He was like, I'm actually really sorry about, what I said. I obviously, didn't try out for Team Solo Mid in League, and I didn't raid in these guilds. My brother raided in these guilds, and I have a friend on my friends list who was a challenger, and that was a screenshot I took. I was like, I'm glad you came clean, but Jesus Christ, man, I gave you so many opportunities. I just felt like that one stuck out of my mind. Not really necessarily as being mean. I guess I was a little bit mean, but I try not to be too mean to people, because, if I'm mean to people, they don't want to play with me.
Fair enough. So if you're saying that other game experience doesn't count when applying for Grizzly, should I not bother writing into you and saying, hey, AK, here's a 2,000-word essay on how I'm the best Diddy Kong racing player in the world?
No, actually, I do like to see people succeed in other games. I've had people join the guild that were top-end WildStar raiders, and, I think I mentioned before, WildStar was, probably the most hardcore, MMO that we've seen in a long time that required a lot of hardcore play. And I had actually a few, several players from WildStar in my guild, and they ended up being, some of the best players in the guild. Other games too that people played, I had a guy who won the world championships in Paladins. I had guys who were top end Heroes of the Storm players in the guild. So they usually end up, if you're really good at another game, usually it can translate over to playing WoW pretty well, because you know how to put in the effort.
Okay. Now, AK, what was your proudest raiding moment?
Oh man, proudest raiding moment: killing Kel'Thuzad.
All right. And inversely, what was your most embarrassing raiding moment?
Embarrassing raiding moment. I guess I shouldn't really say it was a raiding moment per se, but on the beginning of Elysium, we went into that server with, ambitions on being the first guild to clear Molten Core and Onyxia, and we had 3 or 4 other guilds who were way behind us, who decided to put together like 10 or 12 of their own members together in a raid to get in the molten core the next day before us. And they killed Ragnaros on a Wednesday, and then they killed Onyxia before us on a Friday. It was definitely an embarrassing moment because we put so much effort into being the first guild to, well, technically we were the first guild to clear those raids, but be the first people on the server, I guess I should say, is more fair to do that. It was kind of embarrassing because we put in so much time and effort only to be fucked over by some jealous people.
All right, what was the moment that you fell in love with raiding?
Oh, wow. I mean, I guess I could say, going back to downloading off of LimeWire, the Ragnaros kills or, things like that. Just looking at, the effort that people put in, I just kind of knew that, like, okay, this seems really, really fun. And then, when I stepped into CG or Molten Core for the first time, I kind of knew that, like, I really, really liked raiding. Just the effort of, 40 people together, looking to accomplish the same thing was pretty fun in my eyes.
Okay, last question for you, AK. Tell me why you are most excited for World of Warcraft Classic.
Oh, man, I'm excited to push for World First. I feel like pushing for World First on a much larger scale than private servers, and, having Grizzly or whatever up in lights on MMOchampion.com or the front of WoW.com or whatever, definitely excites me a lot. Just to have myself and my guys put in a lot of work to achieve that kind of thing would be pretty exciting.
Or, of course, you meant to say having the whole guild being interviewed on Countdown to Classic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can interview all of us, all 40 of us together.
That'd be wild. All right. AK, I cannot thank you enough. You've made it through the interview. Thank you so much for your time. Please take the opportunity now to let people know again, where can they find you and your work online?
Absolutely. So my YouTube channel, if you just YouTube search Grizzly Kel'Thuzad, you'll find my video, Grizzly vs. Kel'Thuzad. Then my channel, I only have a couple of videos up, Kel'Thuzad video and then a video of us kiting a mob to Stormwind from a couple of years ago. I have those things up. You might see some things in the future, I'm not sure, but I kind of like to concentrate on running the guild rather than content. Also, I have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/AK_Grizzly, where sometimes I stream random games, sometimes I don't. Usually on WoW, I don't stream WoW too much anymore just because like I said before, I'm busy leading a guild. I don't really have time to concentrate on chat and, if I'm dropping frames or whatever. So that's basically where you can find me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again, AK. We'd love to have you back again sometime in the future. If you're ever up for it, please just let me know. I'll be breaking down each raid in depth with a different interviewee. So if you ever want to come back and have a chat about that, just pipe up and I'm sure we can work something out. But from all the listeners of Countdown to Classic, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to coming back.
And that's the interview done, and thank you so much again to AK for agreeing to be on the show and take that time out for Countdown to Classic. I found him super easygoing and fun to talk to, and I'll definitely have to take him up on his offer to come back on the show potentially to talk to you all again about some other topics. And it's now abundantly clear, as I've had a few people say to me, that he's definitely one of those players who's more than likely forgotten more about vanilla World of Warcraft than I will ever know. Thank you so much again to AK. But anyway, with that interview done, now it's time for Calling Countdown. Okay, we've got a caller on the line, and who have we got, and where in the world are you calling from?
Hi, it's Mike. It's Mike from Long Island, New York.
Mike, again, balls of steel. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Back for more.
Yeah, man, back for more. Oh, I love it. I love the discussion.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for calling in. And this time around, again, I approached you and I said, balls of steel, would you be interested at all in talking about something that has become really obvious to a lot of members of the Countdown to Classic Discord? And that is a fucking great dislike of the Alliance. Now, I'm just going to preface this for listeners who aren't in the Countdown to Classic Discord, which if you're not, please come along and jump in because you get a lot of great stuff, including Balls of Steel's rants about the Alliance. But you, on a daily basis, and not to the point that it's annoying, it's incredibly funny, you let us know that you hate the Alliance like nothing else in life. And I said to you, fuck, I have never seen someone, I think you legitimately loathe and hate people who play the Alliance. And you sort of said,
No.
well, sorry, I mean the Alliance in general, that's probably not fair, not people who play the Alliance, but you really hate the Alliance.
Yes, I fucking hate. I do not hate the people who play the Alliance. I hate the characters they're playing. That is the distinction there.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I'm not suggesting that you're like parking out the front of Alliance players' homes going, I'm coming for you.
I mean, when I was younger, I think I thought of doing that at some point, but you know.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. Let's picture that like you're on the couch at the therapist's and I've called you in and I said, look, Mike, I just wanted to talk to you because we're all a bit concerned about you. You've been talking about a great hatred for a faction in a video game. Tell us where and why it started.
Oh God, I was probably 10 years old when I first started playing WoW. This is back in vanilla, and I had made a orc warrior. I'd gotten to around level 20, I believe, and I was in the Hillsbrad foothills, and I had this level 60 Night Elf rogue just endlessly gank me. I think it must have been hours. I can't remember the exact amount of time because I'm young. And ever since then, I've just hated the Alliance. I also friggin' hate Night Elves, by the way, as well. Specifically, I think they're the worst race in the Alliance, more than I'd hate any others.
Excellent. So we've got Patient Zero, this Night Elf player who ganked you for hours. Do you wake up in cold sweats at night still? Just go, Night Elves!
No, oh God, no. It's the exact opposite. I see a Night Elf and I have to fucking kill it. I'm not afraid of them now. I just murder them on sight.
So tell me why. I can sort of understand why, but it's spread out from Night Elves to obviously the Alliance on the whole. Is that right?
Yeah, I would also partially say that all of my actually a lot of old friends now that I really think about it, when I first started playing WoW, all played Horde. So I just played Horde with them, which is probably faction. Well, all their friends played this faction, so they just hopped along.
Okay, so I was going to ask what made you pick Horde, and it's obviously just that's what your friends were doing. So it wasn't necessarily love of the Horde that got you there in the first place.
Yeah, initially, it was not just the love of the Horde that got me.
So do you think of that sliding doors moment where you're like Gwyneth Paltrow on the, waiting for the train, and your friends actually picked the Alliance, and you fucking hate the Horde?
I feel like there is an alternate universe that is very possible where I could hate the Horde and love the Alliance, but I am glad I do not know of that alternate universe because I do not know how I would live with myself.
Okay. Now, when I say that you hate the Alliance, people think that, I hate the Alliance too. What's so special about this guy? Fuck. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Mike really genuinely loathes and dedicates time and passion to letting other people know how much he hates the Alliance. You created memes. You speak about it daily. Tell me how it got so passionate over time after that ganking session with the Night Elf.
I think it was also partially because when I watched, what was it, Oxhorn, who made WoW Machinimas back in the day, and he made the anti-elf anthem. And I listened to that, and I was just like, oh man, this is the best fucking song ever. It's fucking just all about shitting on night elves. And also when I played D&D, our DM just had a loathing hatred for elves and all like races that just happened to be in the Alliance. Also, I also think the Alliance boring as fuck. Like, who the fuck wants to play a human or just a shorter human, aka a dwarf, or just a human with fucking pointy ears in a fantasy game?
Very good point. Very good point. Now, you seem to go out of your way to dissuade current players and perhaps new players from rolling as Alliance toons. What do you do to try and convince them to come to what you say is the superior faction?
Oh, I just tell them that, like, most Alliance players are, like... I actually don't, like, have any, like, factual information to, like, get people to roll on the Alliance. I just hate the Alliance personally, so I'd rather just have more people to play with on the Horde with me, because I'll never play the Alliance. But I guess you could say it's sort of an irrational hatred for the Alliance. Right. But...
So is the argument often, so why should I roll Horde, Mike? Because
the Alliance fucking sucks.
Just because? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Also because I actually just hate how, like, generally from the years I played WoW, most of them such a fucking Care Bear mentality. I'm like, go fucking kill, you're playing on a PvP server, yet all you want to do is go raid. Just go out and fucking kill people. I don't understand. You're missing half the game. PvP is so much fun.
All right. And well, that leads me to the next thing that I want to discuss, and we'll come back to Alliance and Horde, but you're a mad PvP fan, and you often pipe up, the great motto, if it's red, it's dead. Now, having not played on a PvP server myself in the vanilla days, this was actually weirdly a term that I had forgotten about. And when I started the podcast, I was like, oh yeah, I remember people sort of vaguely saying that, if it's red, it's dead. Talk about if it's red, it's dead to the listeners.
So if it's red, it's dead. It's literally just the motto. If you're playing on a PvP server, doesn't matter what level they are. If they are on the opposite faction, see that red text, you run over and you do whatever you fucking can to kill them. Doesn't matter what you have to do, you kill them. If it's red, it's dead. Put their face in the dirt.
No mercy.
No mercy. Doesn't matter what level they are. No mercy. If they have red text, they are dead.
Just like the Karate Kid, Daniel-san is fucking to go down.
Yeah, man. Oh, God, I've wanted to cry forever.
All right, so if it's red, it's dead. Does that apply to, do you stand by sort of low-level ganking? If it's an Alliance player, they gotta go? Sorry, buddy.
I have to say yes, because if I didn't, I'd be a fucking hypocrite, because I have spent hours ganking low characters, just for the catharsis, honestly. Just for some reason, I just apparently, I was also, when I did this, I don't like gank lobbies as much as I did, but like back in Wrath of the Lich King, I think there was a bug back then where I used to go to the gnome and dwarf starting zone, and I would just put down a snake trap, and it would just fucking pop whenever, like, a ton of people would, like, name new characters zone. It would just pop and insta-give them. I used to do that for hours. It was basically not even letting people from the get-go play the game.
All right. Now, Mike, I love you like a son, but for all the listeners right now who are listening mortified, going, this fucking arsehole, what is his deal? What would you have to say is, if you do it in moderation, perhaps make an argument for ganking lobbies if there is one to be made?
The only legitimate argument I could make about ganking lobbies is, like, if you're just bored and you want to just somehow if you just hate the Alliance as much as I do, you just want to get some steam off your chest and just ruin people's experience of the game for a little while. Like, I don't think there's actually any, like, real, maybe if, like, if you were on another character that was low level than them and they just start ganking you, so you just get on your main, you camp the shit out of them because you were just like done getting killed by them, I guess is like a legitimate reason. Or if like they fucked with your friend. Like I had times like every expansion where someone would just be fucking with my friends who were trying to level. I'd get on my main and camp them for hours and made sure they never killed my friends ever again.
Okay, now this is a disclaimer to note that the thoughts of Mike are not the thoughts of Countdown to Classic Incorporated, and no, I'm with you, dude. But please, listeners, if what Mike is saying is infuriating you, do one of either two things.
Oh, fight me. If
fight
it's infuriating,
him. Fight
me.
him. Yes, jump on the Countdown to Classic Discord, come say hello, do it politely, but also you can alternatively write your angry letters to Mike, courtesy of New Jersey. I'm sure you're the only Mike in New Jersey, right?
I live on Long Island. I live in...
Oh, sorry, Long Island. That's right, of course. The only Mike on Long Island, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, totally. I totally don't personally know like 10 other Mikes, It's totally not a common name.
All right, well, back to Horde versus Alliance, just real quick to wrap up. Now, what do you plan on doing for Classic in terms of organizing and showing your hatred of that faction?
Personally, I usually do it in my own way, but maybe for the initial launch, maybe for a little time after, I'll probably start a guild for people that are just leveling, and we're just going to cause as much world PvP as possible. It's we're just going to stop whatever we're doing for our leveling and just go and stop other Alliance players from leveling.
And in terms of, getting people who feel the same way as you together, do you bump into a lot of people that kind of go, yeah, fuck the Alliance, bro, and you have a secret handshake?
Actually, there's not that many people, at least there's not many people that hate the Alliance as much as I do. There's some people that are like, yeah, the Alliance is not great. Let's go kill them. But I feel like there's probably a lot of people who have the same thought process as me that I just haven't talked to. But personally, most of the people I know either just have played both factions, which is fucking traitorous, by the way. Screw the people who fucking jump between the goddamn factions. Just pick one. Have some loyalty, for Christ's sake.
That's me. These days, no, because I was Alliance. You know my story. I was Alliance back in the vanilla days. And while I've been dabbling in the game since, I do chop and change when I'm not taking the game seriously. I haven't taken either faction to 60 or beyond anytime lately. I'm still, my heart is with the Alliance from back in the day, but I've just sort of seen the game from a few different angles since. But I am changing to Horde for Classic. I'm devoting myself to that faction. Whether you call me a traitor or what have you, I'll take all your slings and arrows, but I am jumping ship for the Horde.
You're a good man. You've chosen the right faction now, as long as you stay there. Stay with the Horde. Stay with the correct faction.
Exactly. I'll try to do it nobly, though. I don't know if I want to go looking for whatever extremist anti-Alliance websites you hang out on the dark web or whatever.
I've actually never been on the dark web, but
all right. Well, thanks so much for calling again, Mike, and thank you for letting everyone know about your feelings about the Alliance. And if anyone wants to come in and say, hey, you know what? I got a thing or two to say about the filthy Horde, then please do contact me and come on the show for a bit of a rebuttal, maybe. Or we'll get you and Mike on the same phone call and have a bit of fun. But Mike, thanks so much. Please get it on, he says. Mike, thanks so much for calling in again. I do appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, Josh. It is an absolute pleasure.
Okay, we've got another caller on the line now. And who are we speaking with, and where in the world are you calling from?
My name is Randall from Arizona, United States.
Thanks so much for calling in, Randall. Now, you approached me just today saying that you'd love to be able to have a shot at talking even more changes on the show. And it's great to have more people approaching me about this, because obviously just on Friday's episode this past week, I played the first call for a while that really got their hooks into the changes topic. And I'm more than happy to have more people come and give changes the time that it deserves, considering there has been a lot of no changes chat on the show. show. So what is it that makes you passionate about potential changes that could be coming to World of Warcraft Classic?
Well, to be honest, I played vanilla. I haven't played retail since a couple months after BC. And, I'm saying the same things I was saying then. I feel like they ruined the game. They went way too far. So I do understand the slippery slope argument, but I'm singing the same tune that I was singing back then, and all my guildmates and most raiders were at that time.
Okay. Now, you're someone who started playing World of Warcraft in the beta. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I took a break from playing a more hardcore game called Dark Age of Camelot. The beta was out. It was open beta. I didn't get too far. I know I think level 18. I can't remember if I made a druid or a hunter. So I really don't know much about how it was towards the end of the beta or like at a higher level. But I do remember little things that were different,
Okay. Now, you mentioned to me that you have a lot of disagreements with most of the things that you hear from the hashtag no changes kind of scene. What is it that you hear that sort of makes you tear your hair out the most about what the no changes push for in World of Warcraft Classic?
Well, first off, I understand no changes. Totally get it. But I think that most of the people that are singing that tune are people that are playing on private servers. They know how the game is. They know they're good. They know what to do, when to do it, and how to get ahead of the competition. And I really don't think a lot of those people, I should say, are really looking to play the game for nostalgia. It's more so a competitive mindset, I think. I've only heard a few people really talk about, I want no changes because I was a noob back then and I know what I was doing and I want it to be just like that. It doesn't seem like that's the argument going on.
So when you hear things from the no changes crowd that you mentioned to me, it does irk you slightly when they say no changes on one hand, and obviously this isn't all the no changes crowd, but you say you've heard it from some corners. They say they want no changes, but then they also say in the same breath they want things like higher realm populations and perhaps new graphics or things like that. What do you have to say in response to that?
Well, first off, there's already been changes, right? We're starting on the 1.12 client or patch, I should say, and that's so not vanilla to me that it just blows my mind that anyone wants to start on that patch and then not change anything according to that level. And the graphics is a whole different thing, so I'll get into that. But starting off at 1.12, I should say is when I played, it was really hard to get in a raiding guild that didn't suck. It was really difficult, and only a few people actually got to raid. Some people got to touch a few things. Some people, there was no pug raids. I saw a couple pug ZG raids. That was about it. And it was a big thing to accomplish, getting that far in the game. Given how difficult it was, on some of the earlier patches.
So when you talk about the fact that you might be a little bit upset that we're starting potentially in 1.12, and as they've said, they're using it as a foundation, whatever the hell that means. But yes, it's obviously that we more than likely are, starting in 1.12 content in some way, one way or another. When you hear that, are you upset that we're not going from 1.1 all the way through the patch progression?
It kind of stinks. I thought about it before, and I knew that they weren't going to do a progressive patch system. Right? That's just too much work. It doesn't sound feasible. And if they introduce patches like that, they're going to introduce bugs that we've never seen before. It would be a mess. So I understand. I already knew that they were going to probably do 1.12, but I'm hoping, and there hasn't been any announcements. I really hope there are some adjustments based on that patch. It's going to be too easy. It is no way. Just people downing rag day one the fact that people want that, it blows my mind.
You said something interesting to me in our chat just before this call started, and that was this point that you raised when you said that now you were a hardcore raider, you played all the way up to Naxxramas, and like many people back in the day, perhaps there were guilds that might have gotten a little bit further than you, but you got to the door of Naxxramas, but you didn't really get past the first boss. Is that the case?
Yeah. So my guild, we were having issues with Cthulhu. And our guild broke up. Then we merged with another guild, and then we were doing AQ40, and then finally we started doing Nax, and it was the end of our guild. Really, I think our original guild might have progressed a little further in Nax, but yeah, we didn't get far. And then TBC was coming out, and all we did was just run around. And PvP we didn't really have any motivation to keep going beyond, honestly, the first boss of Nax. And we didn't even down the first boss. That was about it.
Well, the interesting part that you said to me was, and tell me if I'm taking you out of context here, but you mentioned that basically back in the day, you felt that most high-end raiders wanted changes. We all felt bad that most specs sucked. So would you like to extrapolate on that point of yours a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you made your character, and this is, people are going to fall into this trap too now, right? Because they don't play in private servers. Some of them have never played vanilla before, but you just eventually knew that feral druids were terrible. You knew that you didn't want any ret paladins in the raid. Everyone knew that, but you made friends with these people, right? And unfortunately, you had to force them into a spec just so you could progress. I just feel that, new people going into the game are going to fall into that same trap. And, it's going to push out a lot of the casuals. And personally, I think that casuals they make the game. It's not all about that hardcore crowd. It is a bunch of casuals with hardcores having their little place in there as well.
Do you think we're going to fall in the same traps with stereotypes that you just mentioned, things like feral druids and ret paladins with Classic? Or do you feel that with all the information at our disposal now, and obviously on the show we've heard a number of people come on and implore people to think differently about specs like those, that we will actually challenge ourselves? Will someone like you challenge yourself to be in a guild that maybe tries to think outside the box and get specs like that more acceptable, or not so much?
Well, there's always going to be guilds that are going to accept some of those players on a certain level, but obviously they're going to progress slower than other guilds. And even, when you die to a certain boss or you're wiping, you can't clear a boss, and you have, one ret paladin in there, it's going to be a bad vibe. Yeah, people are going to blame it on that one person. They're going to beg them to respec, and then it's going to push people out. So even if those guilds accept them, there's going to be a point where it leaves a bad taste in their mouth, in my opinion. And it reminds me of, I recently replayed Dark Age of Camelot on another private server. Basically, they did the same thing. And there's classes in that game as well that aren't optimal. And a lot of people played the game. They didn't know that. And after that long grind to the top level, and just to be told, fuck off, they just quit. And they're gone. So they're not going to level another character. I don't think they are.
Okay. So another thing that you mentioned to me was that in terms of private servers, you said you recently tried out the new one, Northdale, and you didn't feel like it was perhaps even a close representation at all of what vanilla World of Warcraft is like. And it's something that sort of gets said every now and again, but not very forcefully, as obviously a lot of these people, will feel that private server experiences are pretty damn close. But it seems like you're suggesting it's actually potentially far from it, like very far from it. Is that the case?
The vibe is definitely there. There's still... So I'm not that far. I'm just a little 40 on a hunter, and I usually main a rogue, but I made a hunter just because I've never tamed pets, and I've always wanted to know, just mess around with pets. And first off, the population's way higher than it should be. I do enjoy the PvP side of it, but the questing is terrible. if they're going to raise that population cap, they're going to have to adjust something with spawns. I remember there was 30 people waiting for, there's a turtle head that spawns. I think it's like some beach. I can't remember the quest. It's in Darkshire or Darkshore. And 20 people were just standing there, just mass clicking and arguing. And it didn't have that vibe where, you know, everyone's together, and it didn't feel like, so I'm on Alliance, and it doesn't feel like everyone's in it together right now. It's just rush. And even if there's a group waiting for a spawn for something before, or waiting for a spawn, someone's going to come along and just take it, and they're not going to care. And no one did that really back in the day. Not that I remember.
Now, is there one particular change, whether it be semi-controversial or relatively standard, that you are absolutely praying will be in World of Warcraft Classic?
Honestly, as far as changes go, I'm pro changes, but I'm not. I definitely do not want anything drastic. But honestly, I wouldn't mind higher resolution textures, just better quality textures. I don't like the new models. I think they look like shit. But just to have, like, if you zoom in on the faces of these characters, it's bad. And I think, like I said, I mentioned earlier that casuals make up the game, in my opinion. And someone who's never played vanilla is going to come on, and they're going to be, I feel like they're going to be pushed away. And the only people that is going to be left are just the hardcore people, the private server community, and little things like that are going to push away some of the people that make the game fun.
Okay. And in terms of, you know, the whole changes versus no changes debate, if there are any sort of, you know, final thing that you'd like to say to the no changes crowd, as, you know, if I were to appoint you as a slight spokesperson for the changes crowd for a second, what's the one thing that you really would want the no changes crowd to understand about where you and the changes movement are coming from?
I'm just hoping, you know, if the game is 100% no changes as much as possible, I just hope that people don't, you know, if someone plays the game, hasn't played vanilla, and they make a character that's suboptimal, you know, they want to play Ret Paladin, just don't tell them, you know, you fucked up. You know, if someone makes a Dwarf Paladin, or actually Dwarf Paladin's better than Human Paladin, I should say a Night Elf Rogue, if someone makes that, don't tell that person to re-roll, especially if they're at level 40. You know what I mean? It's going to push people away, and I just don't want the people that come into the game that have no idea how it's going to be like to feel like they're outsiders and they're going to be pushed away. Because once those people are gone, the server's not going to be as fun. You're not going to run into that many noobs. It's going to be just a bunch of elite people wearing the same gear, doing the same exact thing.
So you also mentioned that you'd love to have a word about raid or dungeon retuning. Is that the case?
Yeah. So, you know, just to start off there, you know, for years, you know, 15 years or whatever, I've been just always talking about vanilla was way harder than retail, and people just laugh about that. And when we start with 1.12, it's going to make us all look like babies, that we couldn't play the game and it wasn't hard. We didn't know what we were doing. And I honestly, I just don't, the bosses are going to have to be tuned, in my opinion, with these talents, and with what we know now, especially with all the buffs that we're doing all simultaneously. And, you know, it's just going to be a joke. And people might even be bored.
Okay. And if there were a particular way in which they were to retune the dungeons, let's say we get those 1.12 talents, let's say we get those 1.12 items, the itemization, what kind of tinkering or changing of the dial would you like to see in raids? Do you think it needs to go up 25% in difficulty, 50% in difficulty? What would you say generally?
This is why I hope they do a beta, to be honest, so we can really assess what change should be needed. It's hard to say 25%, something like that. I'd prefer, honestly, I don't like the world buffs, and I don't think it doesn't make the game fun. It just makes it more tedious. It doesn't make you special. If everyone's special, you're not special. Everyone's doing it. It's just, all it's doing is busy work. So hopefully, if they make some decisions on something, maybe we could think of a way to tune them, whether it just be through values or just core gameplay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for calling into Countdown to Classic. I really do appreciate it. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's Calling Countdown, and that's the show for the day, everybody. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Just before I let you go, I just want to shout out to the members of the Countdown Council, whom I call every week for input on where the show should head in the week to come. So shout out to Borzen, new council member Flozy B, Raidmar, Palfuris, Permadrunk Rarebit, Seven Winters, Tsunami, The Anton, Wilson Ma, and Valaco. Thank you so much for your phenomenal support of the show. Countdown to Classic would not be the same without your support. And also, a big thank you to supporters Bossman764, Hurlbert, Good Kisser, Myrtlebanks, and Purgatos81 as always. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone, and I shall see you again later in the week for another lore episode all about Duskwood, one of my favorite zones in the game. And if things work out, there may be a bit more voice acting involved. But I look forward to seeing you all then. Have a great start to the week.